back. Um, we've had an interesting morning discussing two books. We are going to be discussing now The Great Unravelling, India After 2014. Uh, welcome, uh, Mr. Sanjay Jha. Welcome, Mr. Dilip Cherian, to the Vasant Vihar Litfest 2021. Um, the book is about Sanjay Jha taking a long and hard look at what lies ahead, the future of India. Sanjay Jha is a columnist and an author. He was the former national spokesperson for the Indian National Congress and the former president of the All India Professional Congress. Dilip Cherian is a communication consultant and a political campaign advisor. He's an independent board member and advisor on several companies and a full-time leader of his own team at Perfect Relations. He has made image management a science that harnesses both data and artificial intelligence to make it more effective and sustainable. Mr. Cherian, over to you to find out more about what the book, The Great Unravelling, has in store for us.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of those who are listening. It's a pleasure to be at the Vasant Vihar Litfest, having been there personally
Exactly.
during better times.
Yes, I know.
During
I mean, this is a different medium altogether, but nevertheless, here we are. So, absolutely.
I love the fact that you have an engaged audience of people who are also rare to find in this day and age, both readers as well as those who actually have different perspectives and bring those to life. So it's a pleasure to be here. And
thank you.
As for my dear friend Sanjay, I have known Sanjay since the time which he mentions in the prologue to his book, from the days he was a savvy and smart, sassy banker with Grinleys, a bank which, like much else that has happened in this world, has also vanished from our lexicon, at least in India. Though I'm sure that many of those in the audience would remember Grinleys with a great deal of fondness. Sanjay was one of their smart Delhi bankers at a point in time when he was actually courting the girl who he was later about to marry. So I've known Sanjay for a long time, and it's with pleasure that I've read his book. It's a fascinating tour de force of modern India. It's frightening in parts because of the fact that he writes facts. It's also a book which, at its core, and from a biased personal perspective, he uses the word communications, image, PR, message, probably more than almost any other word, partially because, of course, of his duties as a spokesperson for the Congress party for a period in time. But I know that from banking to cricket to politics to communalism, Sanjay is an expert on many of the subjects that interest all of us as citizens of India. But let me dive straight into the book, because it's a great book, and those of you who are interested in modern India would find it worth your while, because it's written nicely with both a touch of shall I say light self-criticism and praise, and also with a heart, because here is a man who truly believes and worries about the country like a lot of us do. But in a sense, Sanjay, the title of your book, while it presumes to talk about India after 2014 as the great unraveling, in some senses, you are bringing to all of us the great unraveling of India's grand old party, the Congress. And what was it like? The the journey with the party towards the end. Let's start with that, because I know that's your last chapter, as it were. But let's start with that so that we have we can rapidly come to speed.
Well, firstly, Dilip, thank you very much for those lovely warm words of introduction. And as you rightly said, you've known me from the times when I was single and footloose and fancy free. And I'm happy you haven't made any further public disclosures on my
No.
dealers. And thank you, Vasant Vihar Club, for inviting us. I think it's a delight to be with Dilip. I have known him for a long time, and he's never missed words. Dilip, let me bite the bullet on your question. You are aware that in 2004, a little before 2004, I got to know the Congress when the party was in the dumps, literally written off. And, the 2004 145 seats was not really an emphatic Congress victory. It was more a vote against what many people felt was the overconfidence of the BJP in India shining. Uh, the Congress did, in my opinion, between 2004 and 2009, come up with some very good legislation in the RTI and the Manrega, which were powerful because they were empowering, one in terms of information and transparency, and the other uh, for the real rural poor, that is the backbone of Indian society that is very often ignored, the Bharat of India. 2009 onwards, Dilip, honestly, the Congress got 206 seats based on Dr. Manmohan Singh's good performance of the economy, despite the Great Recession that had, kind of literally eviscerated the world economy after the mortgage crisis in America. And the fact that Dr. Manmohan Singh came across as an incorruptible, a man of great integrity, wisdom, erudition, who stood for the principles of good governance when he put his neck out and risked the government on the civil nuclear liability law. Uh, I thought the tragedy for the Congress was really there. That you got an emphatic win. Well, 206 seats was not an independent absolute majority, but you were a significant partner in the coalition. But when the Anna Hazare Arvind Kejriwal agitation started, the Congress completely crumbled. Somewhere it told me that we appeared not just defensive, but almost guilty. So if you make an allegation, the Congress party just kind of accepted that at face value and literally crumbled. 5 senior ministers going to receive Baba Ramdev at the airport. To my mind, these were manifestations of a party that clearly had lost the reality of, what people expect you to do. People expect you to lead. People expect you to troubleshoot. And I think, although it was a good gesture to involve the 5 people from the Jan Lokpal agitation into framing the law, I met a lot of people, Dilip, who told me the Congress party is actually not fit to govern this country. And you know what? Why they told me that? They said, listen, we vote you. You are the politicians. It's your job to administer and govern the country. Why is the Congress party suddenly inviting 5 civil society activists and giving them a 50% say in the framing of a legislation? Invite the opposition, invite the BJP. But why? You can take the inputs from Kejriwal and Hazare and Mr. Bhushan, but for you to incorporate them in the decision-making process itself shows a sign of weakness. And that's exactly what transpired. So, in short, Dilip, I saw the party disintegrate. And after the 2014 defeat, I think this whole going into a cocoon, hibernating, it was terrible. I do believe that Rahul himself made the error of taking too long to emerge from the shadows of defeat. And by the time he became the Congress president, and we did reasonably well in Gujarat, the people were almost buying into the idea that Narendra Modi was the only national leader. And I think that perception continues to remain even today.
That's an interesting approach to looking at the problem. And as you said, the UPA's victory, um, in which I played a modest part as a political strategist during the first round. And then hubris had reached such a level that they were not willing to allow the same part to be played in the 2014 elections, which where we only did the digital stuff. But you mentioned in your book that in 2017, you had prepared a political strategy report for the party. What were your suggestions at that time? If you can, if any of them are uh, worthy of being put into the public domain now, and how were they taken by the party? high command at that time, because at that time you still had the notion of a high command which hadn't been questioned.
Dilip, I'm glad you asked me that. In 2017, I messaged Rahul and told him that I'm coming to Delhi. I want to give you a real solid presentation. I know the Congress has written off. We're not doing well. Mr. Modi is still, riding on a stallion. He's won Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, but we still got time, and things can change dramatically. I landed in Delhi. I spent enough time there. But Rahul Gandhi's office completely stonewalled me. I mean, this has been the problem with Rahul's, entire cabal or the coterie that works around him. And I'm being very blunt on your channel. I'm very fond of Rahul, but these were tactical mistakes he made. I mean, it was not just Jyotiraditya Scindia's and, everybody else. Practically anybody in the Congress who wanted access to Rahul found himself being barricaded. Now, I'll tell you the couple of ideas that were there. I can share some of them. One of them was when I met the former president, Srimati Pratibha Patil here in the Raj Bhavan in Mumbai. She called me for dinner and we had long chats. I met her a couple of times. She told me that I'm hearing a lot of rumors that Priyanka Gandhi Vadra is going to be soon in politics and will look after Uttar Pradesh. Now, that was quite some time earlier than before she finally came into the game in 2019. The fact is that she came up with a brilliant suggestion. She said, you must tell Rahul Gandhi or Mrs. Gandhi that instead of putting her in the snake pit of UP politics, where the Congress is virtually obliterated, it'll be an uphill task for her. Let her become the president of the Mahila Congress wing of the Congress. And her view was intelligent. She said, if she becomes the president of the Mahila Congress, she has a national footprint. Women issues are escalating by the day. There were these horrible attacks, and we know what the dastardly rapes that have happened in Katwa now and all over the country throughout the period. And she said that women voters are going to be crucial in the country, and women issues are going to dominate. And this country is not gender neutral as it should be. And she said, if Priyanka takes that role, not only do you have a political capital out of it, she's able to raise issues that that will carry greater currency. And more important, you don't restrict her to the boroughs of Uttar Pradesh or limited Rai Bareli and Amethi. That was one of the suggestions that I was actually giving to Rahul. The other one was, and this was very critical, I told him that you focus in the 2019 elections, don't waste your time on states where you are not a significant player. So my suggestion to Rahul was, don't spend your time in Uttar Pradesh because you are likely to depend upon an ally. If you go on your own, you're not going to get more than a handful of seats. Go and focus only on those low-hanging fruits where it's a BJP versus Congress, a direct competition. And, I gave an ABC analysis saying, it's basically a couple of focus areas will get you the majority results. And it's interesting, Dilip, that if you look at the BJP versus Congress in 2019, you'll be stunned at this number. Out of 195 seats that were head-to-head, literally the BJP versus Congress contest, like, Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Himachal, Uttarakhand kind of stuff, the BJP won 172 seats out of 195. And if you notice, you'll find Rahul spent most of his time in Uttar Pradesh, and which is a critical state. Nobody's denying it. But you are not a front runner. You are fourth, and sometimes you are a laggard even behind a nota. And I think these are the points that Rahul probably missed to understand. And you'll be delighted to know what I had as a communication suggestion. I told him, from beginning today that I'm giving you this presentation in, spend 70% of your time in communication. Improve your Hindi was one of my suggestions for him. That if you want to be seen as a great pan-India national leader, then you need to speak a very nuanced Hindi. Narendra Modi, I don't think he's a great orator, but Narendra Modi has a fabulous command over the language that dominates the Indian psyche. And let me tell you this, even in Maharashtra where I live, where people's Hindi is pretty chalu type, people believe jo Hindi acha bolta hai, wo zarur ahem rajneta hoga. There's greater currency and credibility. And I think Rahul, unfortunately, never even bothered to see the presentation.
He may have missed that presentation, and I think that he paid a price for not taking in good advice from wherever it's available. But he certainly could not have missed the article that you co-wrote and which you reproduce in the book in the Times of India, I think, in March 2020. And that resulted in you getting even more flack from Congress leaders. Most Indian parties, of course, famously lack inner party democracy. And the so called uh, group of 23, which have now come out in the open um, with clear public posturing that they are not rebels, but they are really looking at inner party democracy. Uh, why were you surprised at the reaction at that point of time after your article? Because in a sense, that was the inflection point.
Uh, Dilip, that article was written with a lot of angst within me. Uh, I mentioned that in the book somewhere that, there were people who would come and meet me here in Mumbai and every other place that I traveled, who were very upset at the direction India was taking. But they were very clear that while the BJP was fulfilling its agenda, it was walking the talk. This big mistake a lot of us make is to believe that the common man doesn't understand politics or doesn't understand the finer workings of the political ecosystem. Many of the people who have actually voted Congress understand that the BJP is fulfilling its agenda explicitly. There are people who come and tell me, listen, you can criticize the BJP over Article 370, you can criticize them over pushing certain agendas, but they have said it transparently in their manifesto. But what we are disappointed with is in the Congress, which says that you're progressive, tolerant, inclusive, and secular, but you're practicing very duplicitous politics. And that, frankly, began to bother me. And I also found, Dilip, very disconcerting, to be honest. You get knocked out in a 2014 election to 44 seats. In 2019 is 52 seats. Now we can't say that we went up by 20%. And and the party does not even hold a single serious deliberation as to what went wrong. Dilip, you have advised some of the largest branded corporates in India. And crisis management has been one of your strong areas. When a company goes through a crisis, the thing the leaders do is respond. You communicate, you create a strategy, you know how to handle different stakeholders, you look at how competition is going to come at you, you look at media perception. The Congress chose to do nothing. And I was, a lot of us were exhausted. I was tired of going on television and, mouthing platitudes that had no base in substance. And I do believe, and I'm going to say so here, that Rahul, as the leader of the party, I think the buck stopped with him. And I come from a leadership model that says, listen, no matter how good you are, circumstances may have gone against you. Yes, it's true that in 2019, Pulwama and Balakot changed the narrative. But if you haven't won, it's okay. Take a backseat, let somebody else take charge. There is nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying that we have to become like English Premier League football coaches. If you win one year, you're there. If you win next, you go. No. But after 2 election defeats, it's not a bad idea to let somebody else have a chance. Now, if the Congress didn't have talent, I can understand that. But the fact that Rahul's team reacted the way they did, I know Rahul well enough to know that I don't think personally he would have been very miffed with me. But I do believe that there is a cabal that works with him, which said, make an example of Sanjay Jha, fix him, hang him from the tallest tree by the thinnest thread, so that if anybody else has any such ambitions of trying to raise parties' inner problems in a public domain, they will cease to do that.
Thank you. That's very frank, and that's a very interesting extension of what you've written in your book. Um, you know, you talked about the Manmohan Singh government being under pressure with the Anna Hazare movement, and how the government, in some senses, showed that it just lacked the conviction that the people had elected it to lead a democracy, and its role as political leadership was thereafter forever in question. Though it's not in your book because your book came out before it, in, do you see what is currently happening in the farmers' agitation? Do you see a semblance of that kind of people questioning, hey, we elected you, 60% of this country are farmers, we elected you, but you're not listening to us. Because in the rest of the book, you tend to take a very, very, as you said, a very appeasing line, as it were, to the BJP, saying they've written a manifesto. It includes Article 370, it includes a bunch of other things. They're delivering it. But they also in their manifesto have written about doubling farm incomes, listening to farmers. Where do you stand on this in the unraveling of India?
Dilip, I do believe that one of the reasons why the farmers have not even responded to the prime minister, whose credibility is, perceived to be very high, is because they are aware that he himself made that extremely flamboyant promise in the 2014 elections that I will increase the MSP on a cost of production plus 50%. And later on, the government went to the Supreme Court and gave an affidavit saying that we can't do it because this will distort market prices. So they saw the U-turn, and I think that erosion of confidence has been a factor in play. Now, many people haven't said this, but this is a reality. Now, it is wrong to say that the protest that is going on in around the borders, the single borders, are only Punjab-centric or Haryana-centric. I don't think so. Please remember that the Lokpal agitation was very Ramlila, Maidan, and Jantar Mantar centric, right? But the entire country was watching that and they got influenced by it. So I do believe that this government has practiced political arrogance and taken it to another level. Frankly, I have written this in a Times of India op-ed, but I've said that the farm laws principally, while you can tweak it here and there, are fundamentally not flawed. The Congress itself said so in its manifesto. We ourselves said we will remove APMC. There should be farmer procurement centers, but basically you need to liberalize the agricultural sector. The Congress itself said it, and I think that's the right way forward with certain regulatory safeguards for the farmers. I think where the BJP goofed up, and this is, to my mind, this is where their authoritarian politics is despicable, is not allowing a discussion in parliament. You don't even refer it to a standing committee. You hustle people around. And I think today is boomeranged in a big way. The Congress, in my opinion, would not have done that. I have mentioned the point and I say the Congress was the other extreme. The Congress was inviting civil society, which, as Prashant Bhushan was to say later, was RSS sponsored. Prashant is on record, right, to say that the Lokpal agitation was RSS sponsored. The Congress was, instead of listening to the BJP and other opposition, was inviting an RSS-sponsored civil society movement to frame a law. Here you have the BJP that was not even willing to talk to the opposition and not even willing to listen to the farmers. So I think both the parties are two extremes. We can borrow something that Mr. Khan said the other day, the Congress was too much democracy. The BJP, of course, cannot be accused of that.
Given the fact that you've, in some senses, endorsed some of the things that the Modi government is doing, in a hypothetical world, and I'm not insinuating anything here, if you were to have a role in the Modi government, what kind of role would you play? Would you opt to continue to be spokesperson, or would you like to do something else?
Well, I do believe that, number one, that's hypothetical, and there is,
totally.
There's no compatibility between that.
I'm not waiting here.
Yeah. No, but if I were to, I would just focus on one single element, which is respect the Constitution and respect the word secular, not just by, giving your pontificating on it and grandstanding on it through speeches, but make sure that not a single citizen of this country feels insecure. Dilip, it bothers me like hell. I do believe that you, me, and everyone has a fundamental right to live here, to marry who we want to love who we want to buy property where we wish, and to practice my religion without fear. When you read reports that people cannot buy a home because this is apparently not their territory or their residential domain, when you hear reports of interfaith marriages where people are being arrested left, right, and center, you feel that the whole concept of the idea of India is now becoming a new idea of India as defined by the BJP. Now, idea of India is not, as I've said it in my book, some kind of an esoteric, phrase which only people like you and me can debate with, a library behind us. I think that is the core of India. That is the Indian constitution. And if I had a role, I would advise the BJP that in certain ways you need to become a lot more adherent to the constitution. And if you have an issue in terms of past historical grievances, please tell your people, your foot soldiers, to stop indulging in violent attacks and vilifying people. If India is not one, I would tell the BJP, you will never get your economic growth and development happening. Social disharmony is consistent with the kind of economic, shall we say, magnified growth that you're aiming for. So you cannot have a country where there's going to be social tensions and then expect to be the highest GDP growth country in the world. And that's one of the reasons, Dilip, why the NDA has not delivered on its big GDP growth numbers. Because your attention, all of us have only 24 hours in a day. And if the BJP is going to spend all its time plotting on Operation Lotus and looking at their Hindutva agenda, there is no way that you can manage a country with a 2.8 billion GDP, 2.8 trillion GDP, and 140 crore people to manage. It's impossible.
I'm glad you brought that around, because your first chapter on the Hindutva agenda, in a sense, outlines that. And you, in your book, analyze very well, without necessarily wearing the hat of the banker that you used to be, the core of why economic delivery is impossible with social disharmony. But let's go a little further. You talk about the leadership of Narendra Modi, and in the book, you also analyze quite, shall I say, thoroughly, and like me, you have minced no words in your analysis of how the famous Arnab Goswami interview of Rahul Gandhi was in some senses the beginning of a steep decline in public perception of Congress's capability of dynastic leadership. So as a PR person, for me, that was one horrific moment of realization that training, planning, and execution are three elements of communication. But as a spokesperson, you were not a spokesperson then, but as a spokesperson later on, how did you deal with this whole issue of the Rahul image and the Arnab and the Republic of Hate attack that the media had unleashed?
Well, Dilip, to be honest, I had become the spokesperson by that time, but I want to make a point.
Okay.
I want to make a point, Dilip, that I was astonished when I got a call from Ganesh, a lovely guy. He's a lovely guy. I think, honestly, one of the most brilliant people I met in Rahul's team. And I was astonished for only one reason. I used to go repeatedly to Arnab's show. I used to go to his studio. I live in Mumbai. Lower Parel is not too far from my house, and I knew Arnab pretty well at an almost personal level. Now, nobody asked me as directly as to what should he expect. I just get a call, and I knew that Rahul was going to do an interview. In my mind, Rahul had given a fairly, what I call as a powerful speech in the AICC session that had happened just a couple of weeks earlier, and he sounded like a man who was assuming charge on a campaign where we were already on the back foot. But there was hope that it may not be a disaster. But who chose Arnab and why? There is a lot of speculation. People within the Congress know who the people were. It was a terribly bad call. It was an error of judgment of an epic scale, Himalayan blunder of sorts. And the fact, as you rightly mentioned, I remember telling Rahul when I met him in 2004, Dilip, that you got to define your messages, take 3 messages or 4 messages, and you got to drill it back in your interview. But what Rahul forgot, and I don't know who prepared him for this, was those messages come after you answer the question asked. Now, what happened was Arnab asked him one, and Rahul kept saying these are, he kept going back to RTI, women's empowerment, systemic flaws, but he appeared to be therefore dodging the question. And I think these are the basics. How do you bridge between answering the question smartly and move to what is the message you want to convey to your audience? Rahul was unprepared.
I can't let you go so lightly. In the light of what has appeared on Arnab just now, and because at the festival people are living in the now.
Yeah.
That was one version of Arnab. And
Yeah.
now the revelations of Arnab show a kind of capitalist at using a political purpose and with a political agenda. How do you contrast the two is my question.
Well, I do believe that Arnab, probably in my opinion, is an outstanding hypocrite. When he was when he was with me in the studios, he used to tell me, "I'm an anti-establishment man. I will take on anybody, whether BJP or Congress. I'm fighting for the people of India." Basically, he was fighting for the middle class of India, which is okay. The fact of the matter, Dilip, is that today, when you see that he virtually became like a BJP mouthpiece, he got funded by people close to the BJP. There is no ambiguity. I think I remember when the government in Maharashtra took certain steps against him, all the BJP ministers from the NDA wrote in his support. It was a blatant exhibitionism of what I call as a media capture, done very officially by the BJP. But today, Dilip, when you read about a national security leak, when Arnab is on record, and let this be, these are encrypted conversations, so let this be investigated. But if Arnab Goswami, Dilip, knew about the Balakot strike, which happened on Feb 26th, if he knew about it on Feb 23rd, that is a massive military confidentiality breached. What if Pakistan had come to know about it? What if there was an attack on Indian soil done by Pakistan before? Could the government really trust a private channel owner from maintaining the sanctity of that confidential leak, which anyway is, by the way, a transgression? I mean, what are we talking about? Here is a man who sold his soul. I mean, I am so upset, and I hope all the nationalists and the bhakts who come on Twitter on his behalf actually have the shame to apologize, because here is Arnab Goswami literally gloating after the Pulwama attack, saying this has been a crazy day where my ratings have gone through the roof. And he actually uses the words that Balakot will result in an elated people of India, apparently or allegedly uttered by the BJP. I think this, to my mind, is India's Watergate moment. And I do believe that the Congress party steps up, questions the government. This is not about BJP versus Congress. It's about the government. It's about our national security. And I do believe this is India's Watergate moment.
The reason I asked you two questions on this is because I believe that as somebody who has been at the front lines and as somebody who has been in Bombay watching this is an incipient book, as it were, on how media has transformed from one kind of focus to the other. But I'll go onto your book itself, and I would say that from the first chapter where you talk about the Hindutva agenda to the last where you talk about the unraveling of the Congress party as a kind of proof of the unraveling of India, as it were. I'm coming back to this issue of where does a national party of this scale and size look to for leadership, if not within? Is there not reason to expect that it is in this questioning and in this manthan, and as the previous session talked about, in this tehelka of politics, that a new leadership and a new kind of style of reaching out to the public will emerge? What is your take on that?
Absolutely, Dilip. See, the fact is that, and I think Rahul Gandhi should be aware of it. I think the Gandhi family should be aware of it. I've been writing about it. I've said about it before. There are many people who believe that the dynastic bashing that has been done by the BJP, the ridiculing of Rahul by calling him Pappu by the BJP IT cell, and many blunders, self-inflicted wounds committed by the Congress itself, has literally destroyed Rahul Gandhi's brand. And I think, or the Gandhi family brand itself, which used to have massive political weight once upon a time. And listen, Dilip, I don't think there's anything wrong. I mean, you have your highs, you have your lows. It's part of life. I mean, the Kennedys were once upon a time unassailable, and much later, Edward Kennedy could not even make it to the Democratic nomination. So I do believe that bottom line, things change. The Congress is a party which has actually got great talent. We have allowed ourselves to be subsumed by the Gandhi family brand. And I do believe a lot of the political leaders in the Congress do so because they believe they cannot win elections without a Gandhi campaigning for them. But clearly that has not worked in the two Lok Sabha elections and the several states that we have lost. It means that there is a need for a reinvention of both the Congress brand as well as the Gandhi family brand. The problem is that the great historical brand of the Indian National Congress has now become synonymous with the Gandhi family. Now, that is a risk that a party is taking because the Congress party is not Rahul Gandhi. The Congress party is Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, Sardar Patel, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Madan Mohan Malviya, Lala Lajpat Rai, Lokmanya Tilak. You have a phenomenal history. You have things you have done. To reduce it to a Rahul debate, I think the Congress does not do justice to itself. I'm sure Rahul is aware of that too. So I think the time has come for the Congress to have transparent elections. If Rahul today fights, I'll be honest on your show, Dilip, Rahul will win hands down. But let there be an election. Let somebody contest him. Let the Congress party say today that we have chosen Rahul, although we are not doing well because we believe only Rahul can win 2024. Well, good luck. Let that happen. I'll be very happy. Although at the moment, I'm meeting a lot of people who care for the Congress, who come and tell me that, listen, I voted BJP because I believe the Gandhis should not lead the party. They're there. They will obviously have a lot of clout all the time. They have great political relevance. But if you put up a new leader, we are back to backing the Congress. I'd rather have Congress winning without a Gandhi than Congress being led by a Gandhi and getting wiped out in 2024.
In this process of unraveling, you have unwittingly talked about Mahatma Gandhi, who was that was the answer which got you into Grinlace, I remember, in your interview. And then you talk about how the gradual unraveling of Mahatma Gandhi is also something that is happening before our eyes in some senses. And as I know the audience somewhat in Vasant Vihar, and these are people steeped in the lore of India, as it were.
Sure.
Do you see this as also something which the nation, which understands Mahatma Gandhi well, will also push back against? Because as whether it's the Congress party or the BJP, when they waver from the path that is intrinsically, as much almost as the Constitution of India is intrinsically Indian, do you see a party which focuses back on the values of Gandhi being relevant for the future of India?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you one thing, Dilip. America even today lives by what Abraham Lincoln did. I mean, end of day, the values don't change. Governments change, political parties change.
But India is a young country. India is a millennial country, hitching its star to software and the future and modernism. Does Gandhi, the reason I'm asking is that because that's a part of your book again, does Gandhi therefore still hold centrality? You talked about Lincoln, I interrupted you, sorry.
Absolutely. No. Dilip, I'm glad you did. I mean, absolutely. You have Barack Obama, that the world respects as one of the greatest statesman leaders that one has seen in the last decade. Somebody who said, I was inspired by Gandhi, and he was inspired by Martin Luther King, who in turn was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. He was inspired by Nelson Mandela, who said, Mahatma Gandhi made me see things in a different light. Now, we should be so proud of the fact that Mahatma Gandhi took on the British with virtually not a single instigation of violence. What have we become today? Lynching deaths, we kill our own people, we terrorize our own people, we make 200 million minority people in India feel as if they are not relevant in the future, emerging roadmap of this great country. This is not the India that anybody who founded India's constitution ever envisaged. And I bring down this point. My book starts with my pain that a Sadhvi Pragya Singh Thakur, who calls Nathuram Godse a patriot, wins the Bhopal election by 3.5 lakh votes. And look what happens. Exactly a few days ago or last week, Sadhvi Pragya Singh Thakur makes that statement again. And she says that Nathuram Godse is a patriot. So if this country is going to mock the father of the nation who was assassinated and treat him as an anti-national or against the larger belief of the Hindu Rashtra, there cannot be a more or a bigger monumental tragedy for a country.
If I can interrupt here, there is a question which
sure.
Is BJP not supporting Shiv Sena for chief ministerialship? Was this a political mistake in Maharashtra? This is one of the audience questions.
Well, I think they had their own power-grabbing equation. Uddhav Thackeray believed that he had been promised the job of a chief minister that was then retracted by Amit Shah. But that's their own, internal conversations. The fact of the matter is that BJP's arrogance is ultimately costing Maharashtra. But please remember, this is a party that plays for the long haul. It has consumed Nitish Kumar in Bihar. It actually now is a bigger party than the Shiv Sena in Maharashtra. The BJP ultimately is willing to wait patiently to become bigger than the parties on whose shoulder it rides into the state. So once upon a time in Maharashtra, Shiv Sena was much bigger. It gave BJP an entry. And then, is like the anaconda, it swallowed the very person or the very entity that gave it the footing. But that's a BJP strategy and it's working for them. So like it or not, the truth is that the BJP is a formidable force in the state. And I think the entire MVA government here has a tough job on hand to last the entire 5 years.
I think we are
out of
time
time.
is just up now.
Okay, so I will end with
if
one.
you'd like to, your
Just
closing
one
comments,
last
please.
question. And Sanjay, this is a question you should be able to answer quite easily. Given a choice, Rahul or Priyanka?
Well, if there is no third choice, I will probably go with Priyanka because I think it's always good to test somebody new. I'm convinced, Dilip, that it'll help if the Congress chooses somebody who's not from the dynasty, because Rahul himself said that he didn't want anybody from the dynasty. And I think if he adheres to that assurance, it will really build not just his credibility, but enhance Congress's reputation. But if you're kind of giving me no options, then I will go with Priyanka because I believe she has got sharp political instincts. I have mentioned that in the book. She's an outstanding communicator in Hindi. I've worked with her and I can tell you she's got a way of getting you to do things. And, she's extremely got a charming disposition. And I think she's a very friendly person. I also want to give you a personal thing here. And I mentioned that in the book about her emotional intelligence. I came down with COVID in the month of May last year. And, it was so sweet of her to message me not once, but several times asking me how I was recuperating, how I was recovering. And I think that, to my mind, these are the little sensitivities that tell you of a person who cares. And I believe in politics, no matter how sharp you are, how brilliant you are, what a great orator you are, you also got to be a good human being.
Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay. That is very engaging. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dilip. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, the Vasant Vihar Club. I mean, I'm honored to be here, honestly.
And thank you, Mr. Jha, and thank you, Mr. Cherian, for such a riveting conversation. I think it's good we ended on a very positive note that somebody cares for somebody. I think that's a good emotion to finish the conversation on. And I'm sure the Manthan is going to bring out the nectar very soon. So we look forward to that. I have my colleague Raj Sharma here. He will just give a vote of thanks, and over to you, Raj.
Yeah, very simply to say, Mr. Sanjay Jha, Mr. Dilip Cherian, thank you so much for a very enthralling discussion on a subject which I think a lot of people are watching carefully. We would have loved to have you physically here and give you a token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
This will reach your homes shortly. So thank you so much on behalf of Vasant Vihar Club.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you both again.
Thank you.
Thank you.